The British royal family has survived wars, scandals, divorces, betrayals, and public humiliation. But every once in a while, a controversy erupts that feels different from the rest. Not because of what the public sees on the surface, but because of the damage it causes behind palace walls. And according to whispers spreading through aristocratic circles, one explosive conflict involving Princess Anne and Queen Camilla's son nearly pushed the monarchy into one of the ugliest internal battles in modern royal history. It allegedly began with Balmoral Castle. The ancient Scottish estate has never been just another royal residence. For generations, Balmoral represented privacy, tradition, and emotional refuge for the House of Windsor. It was where monarchs escaped the cameras, where royal children spent summers fishing and riding horses. And perhaps most painfully of all, it became the place where Queen Elizabeth II spent her final hours before her death in September 2022. That emotional significance made what supposedly happened next feel unforgivable to some members of the family. The story spreading among palace insiders claimed that Tom Parker Bowles, Camilla's son, had quietly arranged access to Balmoral for what appeared to be a private commercial project connected to luxury hospitality and media production. According to the rumor, outside contractors and production staff were allegedly led to believe they had permission to operate on royal grounds because of Tom's close family connection to the king and queen. At first, nobody questioned it. Why would they? Tom Parker Bowles had spent years moving comfortably through elite circles. He was known publicly as a food writer, broadcaster, and restaurant critic. He attended royal events. He appeared in magazines and television interviews. To outsiders, he looked like a man fully accepted into royal life, even if he never held an official royal title himself. That appearance of legitimacy was supposedly enough to open doors. Vehicles reportedly arrived at Balmoral carrying filming equipment, catering materials, and technical crews before sunrise. Workers moved through parts of the estate believing everything had already been approved. Temporary production areas were allegedly set up inside sections of the property usually kept shielded from commercial activity. Then Princess Anne arrived. Nobody expected her that morning, and had always been known as the hardest working royal in the family. Serious, disciplined, ruthlessly protective of royal duty. Unlike many senior royals, she cared very little for celebrity culture or glamorous publicity campaigns. Balmoral, to her, was sacred ground tied to her mother's memory and to decades of family tradition. When she reportedly walked into one of the occupied rooms and saw equipment cases, lighting rigs, and outside staff moving furniture around inside the castle, the atmosphere changed instantly. Several palace employees would later describe the moment as ice-cold fury, and allegedly demanded to know who had authorized the operation. Staff members, confused and nervous, explained that permission had supposedly come through Tom Parker Bowles and his associates. That answer only made things worse, because according to the story, Anne had never heard a single word about any approved commercial use of Balmoral. The princess immediately ordered all work stopped. Crew members were reportedly told to pack their equipment and leave the estate at once. Security staff stepped in as confusion spread among contractors who suddenly realized something had gone terribly wrong. Some workers apparently believed the conflict was simply a misunderstanding between royal offices. Others feared they had unknowingly become involved in something much more serious. And, however, allegedly saw the situation very differently. To her, this was not a misunderstanding. It was exploitation. The idea that anyone connected to the royal family could privately profit from access to Balmoral without proper authorization struck at the heart of everything Anne believed about royal responsibility. She had spent her entire life defending the institution from accusations of greed, corruption, and entitlement. Watching royal property potentially used for private gain reportedly enraged her beyond measure. And the personal history behind Balmoral made the anger even more intense. Anne had been present during Queen Elizabeth II's final days there. She had walked those same hallways while the world waited anxiously for updates about the Queen's health. She had watched the royal family gather in grief inside those walls. For Anne, Balmoral was not merely expensive property. It carried the emotional weight of her mother's death and decades of royal memory. The idea that cameras, commercial projects, or private deals might intrude on that sanctuary was something she allegedly considered deeply disrespectful. Within hours, reports claimed and contacted royal legal advisors directly. What began as a private confrontation quickly evolved into something far more dangerous. Lawyers were supposedly instructed to determine exactly what permissions had been granted, who had approved access, and whether any contracts or payments had been connected to the alleged operation. That investigation, according to palace rumors, opened a door the monarchy desperately wished had stayed closed. Because once financial questions began appearing, investigators allegedly started looking beyond Balmoral itself. And that was when whispers of a much larger pattern began to emerge. According to the claims circulating in elite royal circles, investigators became interested in whether Tom Parker Bowles had spent years quietly leveraging his proximity to royalty in business arrangements that blurred the line between private entrepreneurship and implied royal endorsement. There was no public evidence proving criminal conduct. But the allegations themselves were explosive enough to terrify palace officials. Publishers, hospitality executives, luxury brands, and event organizers had reportedly long been attracted by Tom's royal connection. Invitations flowed easily. Media opportunities multiplied. Exclusive partnerships appeared wherever royal proximity could add prestige. To some insiders, the question became uncomfortable. Where exactly was the line between personal reputation and monetizing access to the monarchy itself? That question had haunted the royal family for decades. The Windsors had survived endless scandals involving money, influence, and privilege. Prince Andrew's disastrous controversies had already damaged public trust. Harry and Meghan's departure had exposed bitter internal divisions. Public confidence in the monarchy remained fragile. The last thing palace advisors wanted was another scandal involving accusations that royal connections were being used commercially behind closed doors. Princess Anne reportedly understood the danger immediately. Unlike some members of the family, Anne believed scandals became worse when hidden. She had inherited much of Queen Elizabeth's belief in discipline and accountability. If rules existed, they had to apply to everyone. Even family. Especially family. According to insiders, Anne pushed aggressively for a formal investigation rather than a quiet internal settlement. That decision allegedly infuriated Queen Camilla. For Camilla, the situation was deeply personal. Tom Parker Bowles was her son long before she ever became queen. She had protected him throughout his life, defended him through media storms, and helped him navigate the brutal scrutiny attached to royal association. The idea of him facing humiliation or legal consequences allegedly triggered fierce maternal instincts. Sources claimed heated confrontations erupted behind palace doors. Camilla supposedly argued that a public scandal would devastate the monarchy more than the original misconduct ever could, and reportedly disagreed completely. To her, protecting the institution meant proving nobody was above accountability. The conflict quickly evolved beyond Balmoral itself. Old resentments resurfaced. For years, royal watchers had speculated that Anne and Camilla maintained a relationship based more on duty than affection. Publicly, they behaved respectfully. Privately, however, insiders often described tension beneath the surface. Part of that tension allegedly stretched back decades. Long before Camilla married King Charles, and had reportedly shared a close relationship with Andrew Parker Bowles, Camilla's future husband. Royal historians spent years discussing the complicated emotional entanglements surrounding those relationships in the 1970s. Though everyone eventually moved on publicly, palace gossip insisted traces of old bitterness never fully disappeared. Whether true or exaggerated, those historical tensions supposedly intensified the Balmoral dispute dramatically. Meetings became colder. Communication between households reportedly deteriorated. Senior aides allegedly found themselves caught between two powerful royal women refusing to back down. Then came the legal questions. Balmoral occupies a strange position within the British monarchy. Unlike some royal properties tied directly to the Crown estate, Balmoral is privately owned by the monarch personally. That complicated any potential legal action enormously. Who actually possessed authority to pursue a case involving unauthorized commercial use of the property? Could Princess Anne act independently? Did King Charles need to authorize proceedings personally? And perhaps most importantly of all, would Charles choose his sister or his wife? That question reportedly paralyzed the palace. According to insiders, Charles hated confrontation and desperately wanted the entire matter resolved quietly. But neutrality became almost impossible as pressure mounted from both sides. And allegedly believed failing to act would signal weakness and corruption. Camilla allegedly feared public exposure would permanently stain both her family and the monarchy itself. Meanwhile, newspapers began hearing whispers. At first the rumors appeared only in obscure gossip columns and aristocratic chatter. But once reporters detected signs of internal royal conflict involving Balmoral, interest exploded. Palace staff allegedly became terrified that confidential details would leak publicly. Lawyers reportedly issued warnings. Non-disclosure agreements were reviewed. Communications tightened. But fear spread anyway. Some insiders allegedly worried investigators would uncover embarrassing examples of informal royal favors benefiting wealthy associates over many years. Others feared the scandal would trigger renewed scrutiny of how non-royal relatives attached to the monarchy operated commercially. The royal family had always depended partly on mystique. Distance created power. Once the public began imagining secret deals, private influence, and behind-the-scenes privilege, that mystique weakened dangerously. Princess Anne reportedly refused to retreat. Those who knew her best claimed she saw the issue as larger than one individual or one mistake. To Anne, the monarchy's survival depended on public trust. If people believed royal insiders could exploit sacred institutions for profit without consequences, the damage would spread far beyond Balmoral. And unlike many royals, Anne had little interest in popularity contests. She rarely chased headlines. She avoided celebrity culture. She worked relentlessly without demanding praise. That reputation made her determination even more intimidating inside palace walls. According to some accounts, Anne privately warned that shielding misconduct simply because someone belonged to the extended royal family would create catastrophic long-term consequences. The monarchy, she allegedly argued, could not survive by protecting insiders at all costs forever. Camilla reportedly viewed the situation through an entirely different lens. She had spent decades enduring public hatred during the collapse of Charles and Diana's marriage. She understood how brutal media judgment could become. Watching another scandal threaten someone she loved allegedly pushed her into survival mode. Some palace insiders claimed Camilla attempted to persuade Charles to stop any escalation entirely. Others insisted she merely wanted discretion and privacy. Either way, tensions reportedly became unbearable inside royal circles. Meanwhile, Tom Parker Bowles himself remained trapped at the center of the storm. Publicly, he continued appearing calm and professional. Friends described him as frustrated and stunned by the scale of the backlash. Supporters argued he had never intended to disrespect Balmoral or exploit the monarchy maliciously. Critics disagreed. To them, royal access had become a commodity. Whether deliberately or carelessly, they believed lines had been crossed that should never have been approached. As rumors spread, commentators began revisiting Tom's earlier controversies. Old stories resurfaced about youthful drug scandals from the late 1990s that had embarrassed Camilla years before her marriage to Charles. Though Tom had rebuilt his reputation successfully afterward, critics now portrayed the Balmoral allegations as part of a broader pattern of privilege and recklessness. That narrative terrified palace officials. The monarchy had spent years attempting to modernize its image after repeated scandals damaged public confidence. Another crisis involving accusations of entitlement, secrecy, and insider privilege threatened to reopen old wounds at exactly the wrong moment. The legal battle itself reportedly became painfully complicated. Lawyers allegedly argued over contracts, access rights, witness statements, and the meaning of implied authorization. Palace staff members supposedly feared testifying because they worried about angering either Anne's camp or Camilla's allies. Some employees reportedly developed sudden memory lapses. Others avoided involvement completely. The atmosphere inside royal operations allegedly became toxic. And hanging over everything was King Charles. Many insiders believed his indecision worsened the crisis dramatically. Charles reportedly hoped emotions would cool naturally with time. Instead, frustration deepened on all sides. And allegedly interpreted hesitation as weakness. Camilla allegedly interpreted neutrality as betrayal. The king found himself caught between loyalty to his sister, loyalty to his wife, and fear for the institution he had waited his entire life to lead. That pressure reportedly exhausted him. According to royal insiders, private meetings became emotionally draining and increasingly hostile. Advisors struggled to keep communications functioning between competing royal households. Every decision risked angering someone powerful. Meanwhile, the press smelled blood. Even without full confirmation, rumors of legal warfare between Princess Anne and Camilla's family generated enormous public fascination. The monarchy's carefully controlled image of unity suddenly looked fragile again. And perhaps that was the most damaging part of all. Because the scandal allegedly exposed a truth palace officials always tried to hide. Beneath the ceremonies, traditions, and polished appearances, the royal family could become just as bitter, emotional, and divided as any other family under pressure. Only their arguments carried constitutional consequences and global headlines. According to some insiders, and eventually reached a devastating conclusion. The monarchy's greatest threat no longer came from Republican activists or hostile newspapers. It came from inside the institution itself, from blurred boundaries, unaccountable privilege, and the growing belief among royal-connected figures that proximity to the crown could be commercially useful. If that culture continued unchecked, and reportedly believed public trust would eventually collapse entirely. Whether the Balmoral allegations were exaggerated, misunderstood, or partly true almost became secondary to the larger fear now gripping palace corridors. The monarchy's internal system for accountability looked dangerously weak. There was no independent body overseeing royal conduct. No transparent ethics structure. No clear mechanism separating personal family interests from institutional reputation. Everything depended on private negotiations between powerful individuals behind closed doors. And when those individuals disagreed, paralysis followed. That realization reportedly shook even longtime palace staff. For generations, the monarchy survived partly because scandals stayed contained internally. Problems were buried quietly before they reached public view. But modern media made secrecy harder than ever. One leak could destroy years of carefully crafted reputation management overnight. Princess Anne supposedly recognized that reality better than most. Her insistence on confronting the issue head-on reportedly came from fear that silence would ultimately prove more destructive than exposure. If the monarchy appeared unwilling to police itself, public patience might eventually disappear altogether. Camilla, however, allegedly feared the opposite. To her, public humiliation threatened the institution far more than private resolution ever could. Another open royal civil war could deepen national cynicism and hand critics endless ammunition. Both women believed they were protecting the monarchy. That was what made the conflict so tragic. Neither side viewed themselves as villains, and saw herself defending principle. Camilla saw herself defending family. And King Charles stood between them, unable to fully satisfy either. In the end, much about the alleged Balmoral affair remains clouded by rumor, speculation, and conflicting accounts. Palace insiders rarely speak openly, and official confirmation of many details never emerged publicly. But the story continues circulating because it touches something people instinctively believe about power and privilege. That even inside the world's most famous monarchy, family loyalty and accountability can collide in explosive ways. That grief, ambition, resentment, and protection do not disappear simply because people wear crowns. And that behind every palace gate, beneath every ceremonial balcony appearance, human conflict still rules everything. For Princess Anne, the alleged battle over Balmoral reportedly became about preserving dignity, tradition, and respect for Queen Elizabeth's memory.